As the internet has come on, I worked in IT throughout my career.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of there on the front line watching the things that were going on in the development of putting technology in the hands of the common person. When I graduated from college, there were no home computers, there was no internet.
Mhm.
Everything was very different. The internet put so many great things in the hands of the common citizen, but so many terrible things at the same time.
From the Florida Parent Educators Association, home of the largest homeschool convention in America, this is the Not by the Book podcast. I'm your host, FPEA Chairman Suzanne Nunn, and together we will hear from guests who share their journey to who and where they are today. Each one of them at some point left the expected path, ripped the page out of the book that says you have to do it like this, and made their own way. I hope these conversations inspire you as much as they do me. Today, it is my sheer pleasure to talk with Joe Tyler. Joe is the president of Followers in Fellowship, a nonprofit organization committed to advancing Christian education. And he's also chairman of the board for the South Carolina Association of Independent Homeschools. We talk about Joe's journey to and involvement in the world of education, which is a great story. But we also have an impactful conversation about kids and teens who are searching to know who they are and finding their place in the world. I'm sure you're going to love this conversation as much as I did. Let's listen now.
Well, I started out as a orange-ish, red-headed kid, and growing up, we moved every couple of years, which probably led to a certain amount of insecurity when we would go from place to place. I remember vividly when I was 12 years old, we moved from a town in North Carolina to Greenville, South Carolina, that I count as my main place of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I was 12, going into the fourth grade. I was so insecure about everything. I probably pestered my little neighbor to death because I would copy everything he did, because I figured if I did what Steve did, I'd be okay, because he was kind of cool. He tanned in the summertime. I tried to do that one time. Bad mistake. I probably still have melanoma from trying to do that. So I had this orangish red hair, and I had freckles. I had one big birthmark on the side of my face that literally covered my entire cheek. So I really grew up pretty insecure about the way I looked and where I fit into life. The big difference was I started playing baseball, and I had a pretty good arm. And so after a year or so of that, they moved me to pitcher, and I really developed, as James Dobson would say, I really developed my self-esteem from that. And I remember, regardless of how I felt like I looked, I would think, well, I could strike that guy out, or I could strike that person out. So it was the thing that gave me kind of a sense of who I was. And I remember hearing a speaker not too long ago at a homeschool convention saying, remember how you were when you were 12. That's the banner year, because you're not quite getting into those troubling times of puberty and all the transitions that happen there. You feel like you run the world. And I just remember feeling like that. I feel like, I'd arrived at 12. Sometimes I kind of wish I'd have stayed at that age. But anyway, that was a real crucial time in my life.
Yeah, it seems like, those years, even me thinking back to my 12-year-old self, things were simpler, but just about to change. You're just about to become a different person a little bit in your life. But a lot of significant memories and a lot of foundational things happened to you in that year too.
Absolutely.
Those couple of years. So how many siblings did you have?
So I grew up, I was the third boy in my family. We were each 2 years apart. And I had a younger sister 3 years younger than me. So I was kind of the baby boy, and I was also kind of lumped in with my little sister. My dad just not too long ago said, "Yeah, I remember when you were a child, I would want to get you and your two brothers to go somewhere with me, like to the hardware store or something, and you would choose to stay home with Diane and my
Yeah.
mother." And that was kind of I didn't remember that, but it said something about me as a young boy, gave me a little insight into that I don't remember that, but
Mm,
that's kind of sweet to think about. Now that I have grandkids and I can watch them grow up,
yeah.
there is something sweet about a older brother wanting to spend time with his younger sister.
It is. That's true. So, what did your father do that caused you all to travel and move around?
Well, he came back from World War II and went to
Mm,
work, his brother helped him get a job. He had five older brothers and three older sisters. And one of his brothers worked with Esso. The brother that worked with Esso got pretty high in the company because he had tuberculosis before the war, so he was classified 4F. He stayed back in the States and couldn't fight in World War II, so therefore he was one of the few men around.
mm,
Back in the day, it was the men that rose through the ranks, so he had a pretty good job with Esso and was able to get all his brothers' jobs when they came back from the war. So Dad started out driving a fuel oil tanker. When he got married, they didn't even have a car. They
oh,
rented an
that's
apartment, and Daddy drove the truck. He got an apartment close enough to the oil field where he could walk back and forth.
mm,
And so he rose through the ranks of Esso, which is now Exxon, and was transferred every couple of years. So I was actually born in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and probably lived in two or three different cities before he was transferred to Greenville, South Carolina.
that's great. And your mom, I know, I'm sure at that time stayed at home and raised you all and provided the homemaking experiences that you
Absolutely.
grew up with.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. My mother was really well read. I remember other adults telling me that about her. She
Hmm.
really was the smartest one in the family, and she got married right out of high school because that's what people did that didn't go
Mhm.
to college, and that was back before loans and all that stuff. So there was no way she could have gone to college unless somebody would have loaned them the money, which they probably wouldn't have taken advantage of simply because people didn't do that
People didn't
back
do
in the
that.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but mama read all the time, was really smart. So dad came back from the war. He was 7 years older than my mother. And so that caused, and she grew up with five older sisters.
Oh, wow.
So it was interesting combination of families. In fact, when Zan and I got married, she had like six relatives that came to the wedding. That was all the relatives she had. Her dad was an only child. Her mother, I think there were only three kids.
Mm.
In my family, there were 99 that were invitations. There were 33 on my mother's side and 66 on my dad's side. So that's a pretty big clan.
A nice size family there. That's fun. Well, other than baseball, what did you do from those 12 years old to finishing high school? What other interests did you have?
Well, my dad, growing up on a farm, did a lot of hunting and fishing. So
Mhm.
we did a lot of that as I became a teenager. My older brothers could drive way before I did. So they were, of course, always good free transportation. And other than playing a lot of baseball, we did a lot of hunting and fishing. And I remember those became rough years for me as I got into junior high school. Junior high school does seem to be the critical time. I've heard it referred to as kids that are in those elementary years. That's kind of the golden age. Kids still look up to their parents and think of their parents as the greatest thing in the world, and by and large are greatly, greatly influenced by their parents in those years.
Mhm.
And then as they start to go through puberty and question life and try to figure out where they fit into the world, that created a crisis on my part as I got into junior high and then later high school. I had friends that were getting into drinking and drugs and stuff like that.
Mm,
And I remember thinking, that's just not me. I don't fit into that. And the only other group at school to fit into were the believe it or not, in Greenville, South Carolina, they have fraternities and sororities beginning in the seventh grade,
oh, I
which I
didn't
think
realize that. That's
is
crazy.
a real travesty,
Mm,
especially in this day of social media where these kids compare each other to one another all the time. Man, I saw that happening in real time in my life as
mm-hmm.
I went from sixth to seventh grade wearing shoes that didn't match and a shirt that didn't match my pants and felt like, oh, that was cool, to these guys with button down collars and starched shirts and wearing fraternity pins. And
Mm,
it created a crisis in my life, wondering where I fit into this whole thing. And really, that was the genesis that led to my conversion. As I sought answers, and I felt an emptiness inside.
mm,
I felt like I didn't belong. I could still strike everybody out, so there was that.
yeah.
But yeah, it just really led to a crisis of identity. Yeah, we'd call it an identity crisis in our day and time.
Mm. What did you experience as far as your education? Were you a strong student? Was it something you weren't really caring that much about at that point in your life? It was just,
Yeah,
have to do
I
it.
re- yeah, I really didn't care that much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure exactly why. I don't know if I had some kind of borderline learning disability. I don't know. I was an okay reader and I was a very, very creative, good writer. I write
Mm-hmm.
fiction stories all the time. So I felt pretty good about that. But in the classroom, I was sort of the class clown. So if I had a teacher
Yeah,
that
I can
didn't give me a
imagine that.
little if I had a teacher that didn't give me a little slack, I had a hard time in there because I'd be labeled as the bad, annoying kid that disrupted the class. And
Mm,
the interesting thing that happened, it caused me to doubt my own abilities. So I was a C student by and large. But then when I got to seventh grade, I'll never forget it. I had this teacher, Ms. Vickery,
mm,
and she allowed me plenty of slack. In fact, she enjoyed my sense of humor and would laugh with the rest of the class at me. And man, that motivated me,
mm.
strangely enough. And I started really doing my homework for the first time, actually doing my assignments. And then it caused me to think, shoot, I can do work.
Yeah,
I'm not dumb or learning disabled. I can actually do stuff.
that's great. So I know that you went to college. So what happened between seventh grade and your senior year that, pushed you in that direction? Were your parents expecting you to go to college, or did they just kind of leave that open for you?
Yeah, this was an interesting time. It's really a commentary, I think, on the price of college. But at SO, they used to have a plan where my dad, they would withhold so much of his paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
even without his permission. Those were really the good old days, and they would buy stock with it. Well, by the time we got to be college age, there was enough money in there to pay cash for every one of our college educations. So all four of us went to college and they just paid cash for all of it. None of us ever got a loan or anything like that. My oldest two brothers went to USC public school. I was the first one to go to private school because I was recruited to play at Furman University baseball.
Okay.
So that's why I chose to go there. And it's funny, I didn't hear this story until maybe 5 years ago. My dad said the coach called him to offer me a scholarship. It had been kind of cool because it had a little signing thing at a table, with the
Mm-hmm.
coach there, and it had been in the papers and all that. But the coach told him, okay, if he accepts this scholarship, I'll need to schedule his classes, and it may take him 5 to 7 years to graduate. And my dad, knowing he had the money to pay for it, said, "No, thanks. We won't need the scholarship." And it's a good thing because I played for most of that first year, got
Mm-hmm.
pneumonia, realized it'd be a long road back. And by then, I was so involved in Bible studies at college and just the college life in general that I just chose to not play baseball anymore. And that was really a good move for me at the time. Although I must admit that when anybody that plays any sport, the older you get, the better you were, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in my imagination, I'd be in the Baseball Hall of Fame if I'd have stuck with it.
That's a good thing to know back there. So let me back up a little bit. You mentioned some of the things in your life that caused kind of that identity crisis and really put you on the road to seeking some answers about who you were. When did you come to know the Lord? When did you experience the conversion?
Okay, so in my church, there was the dentist's son. I'll never forget him, Billy Bennett. Billy Bennett had the world by a tail. Billy Bennett
Mhm.
was everything any high school kid would want to be.
Mm.
He had the coolest hair, kind of like the Beatles, really James Taylor type hair.
Okay. Yeah.
He was dating the head cheerleader that was the best looking girl in his high school. He
Mhm.
had a red Mustang convertible. This guy had the world by the tail.
I would have
Well,
taken that car.
yeah,
Right.
I didn't measure up to Billy Bennett, but in my heart of hearts, I thought, man, if I could only be Billy Bennett, my life would be perfect.
Mhm.
But I knew I couldn't. And I knew it didn't fit in with the druggy crowd or the drinking crowd or the cool crowd, which Billy Bennett was a part of.
Mm.
I wasn't born in the right side of the tracks to be in that crowd. So anyway, I just had this growing emptiness and uncertainty about what life was all about. And I had a high school youth group leader at church that basically tricked me into going up on this college retreat. I mean, up on a high school retreat when I
Mhm.
was probably ninth grade, ninth going into 10th or eighth
Okay.
going into ninth. I'm not sure which. So I go up there. My brother said, "Hey, you'll enjoy it. You know, there's a great fishing lake." So I went up there and I skipped all the meetings Friday night, Saturday. I fished all day Saturday. Then it started raining hard Saturday afternoon. It was cold. I wasn't catching anything. So I decided to go inside and I went in and they were right in the middle of the final meeting. And there was a very brief, a gospel presentation.
Mhm.
Billy Bennett was there with his beautiful girlfriend sitting in this circle. And after a while, Billy Bennett gets up and describes his life. And I swear I would have thought he was describing me in the way I felt,
Hmm.
not having answers, not feeling like I fit in, not understanding what my role in the universe was,
Wow.
describing this emptiness inside his heart, this void that was there. And he was realizing the only thing that could fill that void was Christ himself.
Mm.
And man, it had a huge impact on me because I saw that it wasn't a matter of being in with the right group. It was a matter of having a relationship with God that was real.
Mm.
And I experienced that for the first time, and it totally changed my life. I remember leading up to that point, I would read my Bible some at night before we went to bed because my brother had had a similar experience the previous year.
Mhm.
And my dad would swing by our room and see us reading our Bibles and think, oh, boys, that's great,
Yeah.
But I wasn't understanding a word of it. It was so
Mm.
confusing to me. So that night they called lights out shortly after that meeting ended. And I was in my bunk reading my Bible and it all made sense. In fact, I wasn't reading my Bible was reading me.
Wow.
I understood every word of it. And
Mm.
they were about to turn out the lights. So I said, shoot, I want to keep reading my Bible. So I acted like I had to go to the bathroom. And I went back in a stall and just sat there reading my Bible as long as I could until somebody ran me out of there. And man, those were really special memories that
Yeah.
I still think back on.
Life changing for you for sure.
Totally.
And I know then that when you chose to go to college, did you know what you were going to major in when you went to college other than baseball?
No, I pretty much majored in baseball. I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll be a pastor or youth worker someday. So I
Mhm.
kind of took religion classes. The funny thing about it, though, is the religion classes were totally liberal and they
Yeah.
were all kind of reasons not to believe the Bible. So my best friend and I kind of had a ministry in the future years with incoming freshmen to encourage them not to believe everything they were hearing, because most of the religion department at Furman were really fallen pastors at that point. Plus, Furman had gotten the Duke endowment. The
Mm-hmm.
founders of Duke Mayonnaise had so much money they couldn't give it away fast enough. So they actually purchased a college and moved it to Durham and renamed it Duke University.
That's
And
crazy.
they poured most of their money into that. But there
Mm-hmm.
were, I think, two other schools that they gave money to. One was Furman, one was Wake Forest. So Furman was trying to live up to this intellectual image. And to
Mm.
do that, they had religion professors that all had all kind of reasons why the Bible was not true. And when I was in high school, I was converted during that Jesus movement,
Mm-hmm.
which had a profound impact.
Will you talk about that for a minute and share a
Sure.
little bit of that experience?
Yes, ma'am. So in the early 70s, some of those guys that were influential in my conversion had been to retreats where tremendous revival had broken out. And my best friend's older brother, Bob, was one of those key players. And so when he came back as a changed person, I don't know, it sort of revived the youth in Greenville, South Carolina. And we had Young Life meetings at that time at just about every one of the schools. And
Mm.
I dare say by the time I was a junior and senior in high school, I could have gone to a different Bible study every morning and every evening during the week. I mean, it was
Wow, that's incredible.
unbelievable. And as an example, the big downtown Blue Blood Church in Columbia, South Carolina, is a big Episcopal church, as that's true throughout the South a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They were Protestant, yet they weren't the right wing Southern Baptist fundamentalist types. So
Mm-hmm.
they tried to be, I don't know, more intellectual Christianity, I guess you could say. But revival was so great that they had to hire extra youth workers, and they had a Friday morning prayer time Bible study at like 6 a.m. And they had over 250 boys there every Friday morning during the school year.
That's
And a
crazy.
different football player from the university would share his testimony.
Wow.
That's unheard of now.
Yeah, you don't
Even
hear
at a
that.
huge school. No. I am seeing shades of that though on social media. Like this year and last year, I've seen those type of events come to fore at Ohio State, where football players
Yeah.
were sharing testimonies out on the common. They were baptizing people.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the same thing at several other universities around. So I remember really praying that throughout my life that my kids would experience that at some point. And so maybe it's my grandkids that may experience
So
that.
we'll experience it.
Not
Yeah.
so much my kids.
Yeah, that time was just, I think you think and you hear a lot of history about that time in the United States. A lot of it is chaotic and, kind of devastating. And so much of the time, the Jesus movement is kind of pushed to the side in that commentary. And, whenever I speak to people individually who were a part of it and they connect the dots, it doesn't
Yeah.
come from a historian necessarily. You really hear and see that there was a lot of people, like, you said, I think it's true even now today. I think it's true that all of us kind of start trying to figure out who we are and where we fit in the world. But I think with everything that was happening in the world too, around, everyone at that point in time, that they really even more so would have struggled with that, children of World War II veterans and, looking at the Korean War and Vietnam, so many things, that were coming along and happening. But
Yeah, Suzanne, I really believe that the end of the Vietnam War had a lot to do with it, as well as
mhm,
the hippie generation was protesting the war,
yeah,
and it finally ended. And it's like they had slain their giant. And so there was a disillusionment because people like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, that had chosen the drug route were dying
hmm
left, right, and center from overdoses. So they realized the drug culture was not where it was at. And even politics, like I say, they had they had overcome, and it's like, what's next now? And they didn't have an answer. I think there was a searching, there was an openness,
Yeah.
and revival really happened during those early 70s.
Yeah. Well, now, when did you make a decision about what you were going to focus on as a major in college? And talk to me a little bit in that about too what you were doing with your social life, because I know you spent a lot of time in Bible studies and leading in those things. So tell me a little bit about
Yes.
that season.
Yeah, those are great times. At Furman, we had a Bible study group that we formed. It was pretty informal, and it grew over the years. By the time I was a junior, senior, there were probably 100 people in there on the, when there were the most people that
Yeah.
came. Typically, it was, 20, 30, 40 people, but now and then we would have big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And real involved in that. I got to be my middle of my junior year, and my best friend, Zan Peters, who I had just hung out with since the time we were freshmen. It's kind of funny how we met. My young life leader knew that I wanted to work in Young Life when I was at Furman, and her Young Life leader in Columbia, that was about 100 miles away, knew that she wanted to work in Young Life. So they gave us each other's names to meet so that we would know somebody that was going to be working in Young Life.
Okay.
And that's how I met Zan. And we were just best friends in the same Bible study. We hung out together. I got into my junior year, and my love had just grown for Zan, and I loved her as way more than just a good friend.
Mm.
But we never spoke in those terms, never held her hand. I think now and then she would let me carry her books for her. Maybe that was the extent of our friendship at that point. And it got to be the middle of my junior year, and I realized, man, I've got to fish or cut bait here. We got to either become romantically involved somehow, or we both need to move on, because we were spending a lot of time together. So it turned out that we were going to be driving on the Blue Ridge Parkway by ourselves after a Bible study. I was going to take her to visit her sister who was at a Young Life camp. And I decided to just propose to her. So I told her how much
Just
I
go
loved
right
her.
in.
Yeah, I told her how much I loved her and felt like she was the one for me. And God had a wonderful plan for her life, and it was me. Four Spiritual Laws version of courtship and marriage, I guess. Well, I was not prepared for the reaction. I would expect a yes or a no in that proposition. She was so mad at me. She did not talk to me for 6 weeks. When we were out among people, she would be so nice with a smile on her face, but that smile was never for me. And I would call her to talk to her, and she would not respond to me. She would listen to me. She'd let me talk. She just would not respond.
Yeah.
So this went on for weeks and weeks. And finally, a good friend of hers, I think really what happened is it forced her into a decision that thought she had already made up her mind on. There were two things she said she would likely never do. One was get married, and the other one was teach.
Yeah.
So it created a crisis on both fronts. And she read Elizabeth Elliot's book, Let Me Be a Woman. And it gave her a vision for Christian womanhood. Now, this was the height of the women's movement. So we were both getting so many messages through the media and through our classes and everything else. And so she was really influenced in that direction, even as a believer. But boy, that book spun her 180 degrees. And so we got married, and the rest is history.
Well, there's a lot of history in the rest of it. So,
Yeah, sure
but
is.
Zan was preparing for law school. Is that correct? She wanted to be a
Yeah.
lawyer.
She and her dad had a plan that she was going to go to law school, and he was a lawyer by profession, but was selling MGIC insurance, which was insurance to big public pools of money so they could give low interest loans to houses, and
Mm.
they guaranteed mortgages. And it was the first time they had guaranteeing a mortgage in the public sector versus the private sector. The military used to do that for veterans, but no
Mm.
bank would give a loan above about a 60 or 80% loan. So the only people that could buy a house, had to put down 20%. So
Yeah.
MGIC came along, and Mr. Peters was one of the first employees in that company. So he did very well for himself
Hmm.
in that, but he knew that wasn't a career path Zan could jump right into. So he was looking forward to quitting that, opening up a private practice with her. And that was going to be, she was in a family of three girls. She was the son he never had. She was
Mm.
probably of the three, the most like him. And certainly probably as stubborn as he was as a little girl. So he and Zan were very close and had
Mm.
their life planned out, had her life planned out. And so I ruined that plan if she went
You
along with
ruined
me.
you ruined it. So she actually didn't. She graduated from college, but didn't go to law school. Correct.
That's right. That's right. And the cool thing about it is it's like she laid that legal career on the altar,
Hmm.
and God gave her back something even better,
Yeah.
because once we had kids and Ty, we just wanted to hold Ty back a year in 5-year kindergarten. It began a lobbying on her part to actually create and modify the law, the homeschool law in South Carolina.
Mm.
And it took a total of like 8 or 9 years. And during that process, she met several women lawyers who told her, Zan, you're doing way more law than I do. All I do is move papers from one side of my desk to another, but
Mm.
you're actually involved in a legislative process and legal process and helping defend these families. And a lot of them actually thought she was a lawyer before it
Hmm.
was over with. So it's like God gave her back something that she put on the altar.
Yeah. In an incredible way. And I think that, it's one of the things that, in knowing the two of you, I know what she did. And, you hear about her stories and you hear about the things that she did. And she always includes you in that. I mean, because you were the dad at home working to support the family
Hmm.
and to support what she was doing. But, I think that now your life shows in the ways that you serve your passion for a Christian education, your passion for, homeschooling. And so that's what I was wondering, when I was talking to you a little bit about your thoughts on education before and your
Hmm.
experience with education. I know you all didn't plan on homeschooling from the beginning. That wasn't like your
No.
first plan. But what did you learn as you walked through some of that process that has, continued to push you more than just the husband that was supportive of her and everything
Right.
she's done, but pushed you to serve and to help found these, boards and these nonprofits that serve education and Christian education for families?
Yeah. So when my oldest son, Ty, was struggling to read by Christmas in a really good kindergarten,
Hmm.
probably only 10 or 12 kids in this class, they were all starting to read at 5 by Christmas.
Yeah.
Ty was gregarious, outgoing, never met a stranger type of kid, and all of a sudden he was not wanting to go to school.
Hmm.
So it really led Zan on a serious search for answers, ultimately deciding he just better late than early. It's interesting to me how things swing, how the pendulum swings.
Hmm.
Now there's more of a trend to teach kid Greek when they're 3 years old. Back in the day, it was really much more popular among private school folks and even public school folks, education specialists, to say, little boys, sometimes they just need longer to read. So
Hmm.
anyway, we just wanted to hold Ty back a year. Long story short, that didn't work. And we ended up, Zan was threatened with truancy, possibility of going to jail. She had read this book that a missionary friend gave her about homeschooling
Hmm.
by Dr. Raymond Moore, and it just she got real excited about it. Now, I didn't read the book. I was, just busy working
Mm-hmm.
like most back in the day. And I didn't share her excitement.
Mm-hmm.
I trusted her though, and I've always trusted her intuitions, especially in regards to our kids, because I knew she was there with them 24/7, and I
Right.
was at work every day or traveling for work. So I finally decided, well, you can't mess up a kid in 5-year kindergarten. All you do is learn shapes and colors. And then lo and behold, ended up being colorblind. So they went half of that
Oh no.
paradigm. But anyway, as we began homeschool, as the royal we began
Mm-hmm.
homeschooling, our family just stayed close. And going back in time a little bit, when I was in college, we had a speaker one time that said the biggest problem with American Christianity is parents don't disciple their kids.
Mm-hmm.
That their kids are in church and involved, and then as soon as they go to college, that's it. They never come back until much, much later, if then at all. I think we're still seeing that trend in spades. The Barna group does this survey, and I know a lot of your listeners have seen this, that I don't know, it's something like 70% ish walk away from their faith once they get to college.
Yeah.
And we've got to reverse that trend. The other thing that was happening when I was in college was numbers were coming out about marriages, and that most marriages, 50% ish of the marriages didn't make it
Mm.
past so many years. And I remember when I was in elementary school, there was one kid that had a dad that had abandoned the family. And they
Wow.
even had to have the teachers get up in front of our classes and explain what divorce was and
Wow.
explain what happened. Fast forward, by the time I was in college, it was 50%. And it was
That's
just
crazy.
common knowledge. And that erosion of the American family was taking a toll on the culture.
Mm.
And I remember when Zan and I were serious about getting married, boy, we were just really burdened by all of that, saying we're gonna do it right, we're gonna do it better. We were both very fortunate in that both of our parents had hung in there and had great marriages, her parents as well as my parents. So
Mm.
we were blessed in that regard. But it was a unique blessing even at the time, as more and more people we saw were getting divorced. And that had a huge impact on us. And so as our family stayed close in those early years of homeschooling, we just took it one year at a time.
Yeah.
And every year was got to be better and better and better. And there were more and more people homeschooling around us. So there became a community of homeschoolers to plug into, to be a part of. One of the main things that was lacking was any kind of homeschool sports back in the day. So my boys and daughter played sports, rec league type sports and that kind
Right.
of thing. We lobbied for a Tim Tebow law by the time they got to high school, but it didn't pass then. So the crazy thing is, my oldest son did get a scholarship to play soccer in college. My younger son, they kept offering him one, but he wanted to focus on his schoolwork. So
Mm.
it's interesting how God will give you the desires of your heart. He'll give you what you focus on.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say that our kids are walking with the Lord and really seeking to raise their next generation to know
Mm.
Him and make Him known.
Well, that is, the goal. And I think that the discipleship of our children is lacking, now. I mean, it's like you said, back then it was an issue. I think it's an issue now in so many ways, because there are parents who really do depend on the church to do a bigger job, or on Christian schools to do more, than, and I think our schedules and time and the busyness is taking away the time for
Yeah.
the discipleship. And I think that was for me one of the big draws to homeschooling. And, I remember when I first met Zan and heard her speak, actually not even met her at that point, just the feeling of like, man, she's like a hero, because now I can do what I want to do because of people like Zan, like,
Yeah.
fighting for that and getting us that time to be at home with our kids and disciple our children. And so that is a huge part of the legacy that you all have created for families, you know, her in her way and you and yours by being there and supporting it. And, you know, but like I said, you had your own job and you had your own career and you were working in those areas. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of listeners out there who serve in homeschooling communities, and it's not always the couple doing it. You know, sometimes you have just, you know, the moms that are leading things and serving on boards and things like that. There are dads that do it too. But what for you pushed you into the place, like I said, was it just out of sheer support for what Zan was doing at that time? Was it lack of men who were willing to step up and do it? I know you all founded SCAYS, you
Mhm.
know, for instance. Was it just a lack of men being involved at that point and you needing
Well,
to show up for it?
not really. I mean, there were things I just wanted to do. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I wanted to participate with her in the organizations that she started, and I really enjoyed it. It's interesting when she founded the South Carolina Association of Independent Homeschools. She and I both were on the board, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, those are the starting of an organization is always starts and fits and starts, and it takes a while.
Yeah.
One of the things that she was great at, though, was recruiting some really sharp men to be on that board. And it's kind of funny that the board for years was like 5 men and Zan. And at one time they had 18 employees and they were all women. So the joke was the women made the money and the men, you know, served on the board. That's kind of the way it was. So,
That's great.
but
So,
I really enjoyed it and felt like it was really a ministry. You know, it's part
mhm.
of our ministry to do that.
So as you have then become a speaker yourself and, you know, been right along with Anne on her journey of all the things that she's done, where do you find yourself now, and like what is in, you know, your heart mostly to share, and you're speaking with dads or with, you know, parents in general? What's your heart's like passion?
I started speaking initially with Zan to just tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
And then we speak about our marriage together because there's just so many funny, down to earth, interesting things about how we met, got married, and
Mm-hmm.
crazy experiences with the kids, like every family has. And then as the internet has come on, I worked in IT throughout my career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of there on the front line watching the things that were going on in the development of putting technology in the hands of the common person. When I graduated from college, you know, there were no home computers, there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was very different. The internet put so many great things in the hands of the common citizen, but so many terrible things at the same time. And I began to hear and see firsthand from a Bible study at work of men that were addicted to pornography and addicted to terrible things. And
Hmm.
I was just blown away by that because I didn't even know how to get on the internet. And here these guys were confessing all these problems they were having. And then as I watched that evolve later, I saw that young kids were getting access to the internet and we're starting to have some of those same issues. So I started speaking about the impact of that and encouraging and warning dads about how to raise, you know, G-rated sons in an
Mm-hmm.
R-rated world, which is really now a triple X-rated world.
Yeah.
There have been some progress, though. I know that a lot of internet providers and even their apps now that have more parental controls on them than they did early on, but it is still an issue. And now, more recently, there's been an explosion of issues in teenage girls as they are comparing themselves with the whole world. You know, it's bad enough that a 12 or 13-year-old girl that doesn't consider herself beautiful compares herself with her people in her class at school, but now she can compare herself to people worldwide and will certainly come up short in that comparison. And
Right.
it has really led to some very harmful things. psychologists are finally waking up. In Christian circles, we've been talking about this for 5+ years, but now finally I'm starting to see stuff more and more in the media about the dangers of it. And many that are close to that technology, there's a documentary Netflix put out a good 5+ years ago, and some of the early Facebook employees are being interviewed, and they're saying they're not going to give their kids access to the internet. So
Yeah.
what do they know that most parents don't know? Well, they understand how our demographics are being bought and sold to the highest bidder,
Hmm.
and there is no such thing as privacy anymore when it comes to any of the apps.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I really enjoy helping any homeschool group continue to meet in their church. There are some homeschool groups that are being booted from their churches for fear of local laws and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I work with an organization called Followers in Fellowship, and we
Right.
we assist homeschool groups, everything from speech and debate to classical conversations to whatever other group there may be. Most of these homeschool groups are led by moms, and they're
Hmm.
not in it for the business. They're not in it to make any money. They're just there to try to encourage and support their kids in their Christian homeschool community.
Right.
And for them to be challenged or come under attack by anyone is reprehensible as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And I think that that's, interesting because it's hard. I think so many churches now, there's so many groups that, I find over and over again that churches are struggling with giving space
Yeah.
to homeschool families to do what they do, or there's so much liability because of things that are going to happen and insurance. And, people have become really scared, but there is a part of me, and I know, there is formal Christian education, obviously. But, I think that churches that are able to support homeschooling families, you really have the perfect discipleship model that you can encourage. You have, so many things that you can help bring to fruition that the church's goal
Mm-hmm.
is and the church's heart is as well. And so I think that, it's been really hard to see so many things that are legal and liability and all of the things that scare the churches from doing it. And, in the space, I know that there's a lot of places that are just constantly battling for space to do this event or that event, whatever it may be. But, I really applaud what you're doing because I think you see the value in that and the need for those families to have that safe space to, still bring families together and do what they're doing. So I would like to go back a little bit and just talk to you a little bit about our daughters and the implications of social media and their identity. And just if you would share some points, because I think, you experienced it as a young man and, a young boy. And for girls, it's not like it's not there for young guys. But for
Mm-hmm.
girls, it's a crisis and it's just
Oh,
so
absolutely.
critical. Can you share a couple of
Sure.
tips or thoughts for you that would be helpful to our listeners for their
Sure.
daughters who are maybe dealing with that?
Well, parents need to be aware that so many bad things can happen. I remember hearing about bullying. That's becomes almost like a buzzword. And sometimes you
Mhm.
begin to think, well, shoot, sounds like everybody has been bullied. But they say the key hour for bullying is after 10 p.m. at night
Hmm.
on social media. Now, what parents are there that are allowing their sons or daughters to go to bed with an iPhone? There's a real issue right there. And and because it's private and you don't have any parent looking in on it, you don't know what's going on there.
Mhm.
Interesting fact, I really believe, well, and scientists are saying now, this is what's led to the whole trans movement among girls wanting to be boys. Girls become, as they compare themselves with supermodels, they
Mhm.
come up short every time. Most girls do. So I guess the choice is for a girl to either get proud and conceited or feel embarrassed and totally inadequate when she compares herself. it's interesting that the first app that actually put filters on faces was Snapchat. And the whole
Mm-hmm.
goal was to try to create a secretive communication device where the text messages and pictures that were sent would disappear. Well, I tell you what, anything that goes through a computer is there forever. Don't let
Mm-hmm.
anybody fool you that it somehow disappears. But anyway, Snapchat was the first ones to create, like, put cat ears on someone or a
Right,
horse
right.
face or whatever. Everybody's probably experienced that. Well, they took it a step further, and then all of the other apps started emulating their success and allowed all kind of filters to make people look different and look better. And I
Mm-hmm.
even see that today as I'm on social media and online looking at things. I'll see some person giving some presentation about something, and then I'll look down through, I'll scroll through their other uploads and find out they don't look like that thing I just saw. They were using a
Mm-hmm.
filter.
Yeah.
So the whole everyone can go online and create an avatar for themselves that is not real.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how many times people get catfished and they think they're, some young girl that's frustrated with the rules of her home goes to meet some person that they think is some young, beautiful, talented guy and ends up being some old guy, old
Mm-hmm.
bald-headed guy, and she ends up in serious harm. We've all seen those stories. But prior to, let me go back a little bit in this whole teen girl thing. As they compare themselves and find themselves wanting, a lot of them decide, well, maybe I need to transition. Maybe that's the direction to go in. Maybe I'm really a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Kirk put it well when he used to discuss this issue with girls on college campuses. He would encourage them that if they felt like their mind was out of sync with their body, focus on changing their mind. Because
Mm-hmm.
once they start down the path of trying to change their body, it's never going to be adequate. And a lot of these people that go through transitions on the other side say, that's not what I expected. I expected this to solve problems, and it didn't. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't fix this hole in my heart.
Yeah.
We know there's only one way to fix that, but even beyond that, as a human, taking drugs and doing surgeries is not the answer. But
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of girls, they've chosen that. Just 5 or 6 years ago, there was one gender clinic in the country, and now there are 300 plus. I don't know what the last count is, but it's sad that we're in a culture where you have to have parental permission to get a library card practically or to get a
Mm-hmm.
driver's license. And yet you can go, a 12-year-old can go to a gender clinic in 20 of the 50 states and get pills that will suppress her going through puberty. And who knows what's going to happen to that young girl when she gets on the other side of it. We don't know because
Oh,
she's skipped
yes. Yeah.
she's skipped puberty for herself and doesn't know what's going to happen on the tail end of that.
Well, it is like there's just not enough research for some of those things yet to see it come full circle and how that looks. But I do know it's devastating. And you mentioned even just the filters, and it's hard for me because we're talking about our daughters and we're talking about younger people, but I look a lot of the time at people my age, people in the business world, younger than me, but adults who are using these filters, and you can see them in person and then see them, on screen, and they don't look like that. It doesn't, match. And, I was with somebody who had that presence on social media, and their young daughter that was, I want to say maybe 9 or 10 years old. And so, she was taking a picture, and the young girl said, "Oh, no, 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 don't post that because, I don't look good." And
Mm.
they filtered it, and I'm thinking at 9 years old, like, you don't think you look good enough to be on the screen. And really what she was asking was for the filter. But if you looked back over the mom's social media account, any pictures that they took and posted of them together, all of it was being filtered. So, it's not just what the kids are doing and finding on their own. I think parents have to be okay with who they are enough too, that they're not using filters and presenting a fake life, in that sense of who they are and how they look. People are not going to be perfect. And it's like you said, once you start messing with your body, you're not going to get it right. And there's not going to be perfection,
Yeah,
And
ask Michael Jackson about that.
Yeah, right. So, but I just so appreciate your perspective and your wisdom when speaking to parents about these things, because, you bring a different perspective, having your background and having seen some of the evolution of how this has really played out over the years. But, none of us have the answer to that identity crisis except God. There's not another
Amen.
answer to that. So I love how you shared your story and just how you encourage people to, find a balance in their life so that their children are protected. That's so important. But, well, I love asking, through your years of doing all of the ministry you've done, seeing Zan go through everything that she did with, your kids and your family and just the stories. I mean, you've seen so many things happen across the homeschool world, as those things have all evolved. But as you guys have faced hard, challenges, building organizations and doing all of the things that you do, what verse of scripture or what, quote do you find yourself relying on to kind of get you through those times and encourage you to keep doing what you're doing?
Well, in our marriage talk, Zan and I spend a lot of time in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it's all there about the issues that men and women face. Among men, I can just picture Adam standing there right beside Eve as she was being tempted to eat that apple. And then the blame and shame that comes later. I mean, all of our challenges in our relationship with God and with one another are right there in those first few chapters. And the timelessness of the scriptures and the accuracy of it and explaining life and the way to live is so profound. So I would have to say it's that. And the other quote that I think about a lot is the one that I don't remember perfectly when I was in college and hearing this speaker say, man, if Christian parents would just bring up their kids to know the Lord, there would be a majority of Christians in this country just in a couple of generations. So we've met the enemy and he is us. We are the problem. We are the challenge. We're the ones that need to step up and change that progression, that regression, I guess you would say. And Barna's survey that he comes out with every few years just underscores the great, great need for that. We need to be parents that model loving the Lord and walking with him in such a way that it's impervious to whatever is going on in our culture. That we just model the love of Christ. We model how God wants us to live.
That's true. That's so true. Well, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up here because we've gone on for a little bit of time here talking, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it and love sharing stories with you. Anytime I get an opportunity to, I love to just listen. But I appreciate your time and thank you for joining us today. Thanks for listening to the Not by the Book podcast from the Florida Parent Educators Association. To learn more about homeschooling in Florida or to find resources to help you on this amazing journey, visit our website at FPEA.com. If you have any suggestions for future guests, contact me, Suzanne, at notbythebook@fpea.com. Thanks again for listening and be inspired to live your life not by the book.